Before we get started with the podcast, I want you all to go check out You Grow Girl. That's Grow, Grow, written by a dear friend of mine, Jay Smith. It's for daily affirmations for Black women. It is filled with beautiful, colorful images of Black women and powerful affirmations. You can find it at Amazon at Amazon.com.
We're back! Welcome back to Red Zone in the Lab with Deuce.
Welcome back to Red Zone in the Lab podcast. This is Dion Deuce Blackney, and we're back with some more NFL draft talk. The draft is tomorrow. We had a few guests come on today. We're going to drop this episode tomorrow. It's like a draft preview. We had Big Doug on from the Big Douglas Show podcast. We had him on. We had Mark Bullock on, football analyst Mark Bullock. Hog Farmer Keith also joined us today, along with Mark Tyler. So, and we had a ton. We had a ton of football talk. Thanks to those guys, it was a pleasure. Interviewing them, just getting some of their knowledge. It was an honor for me. I'm really excited to be able to talk to those guys. They've been in the game a long time. They've been following the Commanders a long time. But yeah, we go over everything. We go over the draft. We go over the state of the Commanders. We go over stadiums, Dan Snyder, what we looking to do in the draft, the offseason, everything. So I thank you again for listening to Red Zone in the Lab podcast. Again, this is Dion Deuce Blackney.
I'm Christian Miles, native Washingtonian and real estate agent servicing the Washington metropolitan area. I started my career as an investor and later transitioned to the residential side. I really wanted to leave the investor side because I wanted to connect with people. Building relationships is important to me. I understand the buying and selling process can be challenging. I get it. I've been there. I'm a mom, wife, friend, and neighbor. I absolutely love helping families and connecting with people. Going through the home buying and selling process is stressful enough. When working with me, I make it fun. As a realtor, I think it's important to be able to connect with you. Every detail is important, no matter how small. Let me take care of the heavy lifting while you focus on the joys of finding a new home. Something I live by: people may not remember what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. With me, it's an experience.
Welcome back to Red Zone in the Lab with Deuce.
Welcome back to Red Zone in the Lab podcast with Dion Deuce Blackney. We're continuing with our interviews on this week for the Commanders. It's NFL Draft Week, and I'm pleased to announce our next guest is Big Doug from the Douglas Show. Thanks for coming. It's a real honor to have you on. I've been following you for a little bit now, and I was able to get you this week, so I really appreciate you coming on. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's get to the Washington franchise. What type of history do you have with the Washington franchise?
Well, let's see. We were down. My dad was in the Navy, so we were living in Northern Virginia when they were good, and then we were gone out of the area for most of the time. They were bad, and really, I grew up a basketball and baseball guy. And my brother started playing football. When he started playing, I got more into it, learning the game. And so they were always the hometown team, so we didn't really have much choice, I guess.
So right now, what's the state of the Commanders right now? From ownership all the way down to the field. Well, if you can sum up in a few words, what's the state of the franchise?
Well, it's the same. It never changes because we start at the top with Dan Snyder, and I just I don't think he does a good job of running the organization. I don't think that the rest of the owners necessarily like him very much, and as we're seeing with the stadium stuff, it doesn't feel like politicians and local lawmakers like him. So it's tough, man, when you're fighting all that stuff before you ever even talk about the football field. Now, on the football field, I think maybe they're heading in the right direction. I think it's too late to think that Ron Rivera doesn't have him going in the right direction. It's a big year for him, though, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think, because like you said, it seems like, Dan Snyder's getting it from everywhere. I mean, DC, Maryland, Virginia, Congress, the fans, and who knows what's going on inside of the building. Before we get a new stadium, do you think a new ownership comes first, a new stadium, possibly have to relocate? But he can't go nowhere. It's not like he can relocate, because I don't know if any city will want him.
Well, and they don't want him. I mean, the league doesn't want him to go anywhere. I mean, DC is a big time top 5 market, particularly if they're rocking and rolling.
Mm-hmm.
They know what a winner does for their pockets. So no, they wouldn't. I don't think they want to go anywhere, and he's not going anywhere as far as the team. I mean, this attorney general stuff would have to be something extra serious.
Yeah. And
I don't think that it will be. And as far as the owners voting him out, I mean, people suggest Jerry Richardson right from the Panthers, but he was old.
Yeah.
And they gave him a lot of money, and he was like, well, I'm not going to do this. Like, I'll just take my money and leave.
Yeah, because they didn't.
He's like 50.
Yeah, and they didn't. Right, and they didn't force out Jerry, right? He just
it never got.
He sold the team, right? It
probably would have gotten there, right?
Yeah.
There was stuff coming out that he was a racist and all kind of stuff, and that's like when you start listing the 5 things that get you kicked out of an organization, like being a racist, right up there at the top.
Yeah,
that's the problem with Dan is Dan hasn't said he hadn't slandered gay people. He's not a racist. He hadn't like checked any of those boxes that get you canceled. So maybe stealing from the owners, but we'll see. I doubt it.
That has to be clear-cut evidence for him. They have to really prove that he's stealing from the owners, because it's all about money, right? And that's what happened with the name change. Is when the money starts to get affected, then changes have to be made. So I believe they really have to prove that he's stealing from the owners. And I don't even think so much the fans. If he proven stealing from the fans, I don't. I might get him a slap on the wrist, but when it comes to stealing from other owners, then that will be a problem. So far, let's get into the football. So far this offseason, up until this point, where do you, how are you as far as how they have handled the offseason so far?
They tried to significantly upgrade the most important position in football. Mm-hmm. So I think, you have to start there. It's easy to say they haven't done a lot, and we as fans wanted more, but I mean, let's be honest, they did. They went out, as Ron's done since he got here, and tried to take a big swing at quarterback.
Yeah.
Now, whether Wentz is the answer, I don't know. We'll see. I personally am higher on him than I think a lot of other fans are. And a third and a fourth for a quarterback, if he plays well, is not a lot. Neither is $28 million. So I think it probably affected a little bit of what they wanted to do as far as where they allocated their money. But, I mean, I think you start right there, right? I mean, if he is an upgrade, if he gets you into like the top 12 quarterback play, top 14, I mean, Heineke was like the 28th best quarterback last year. Right. I mean, think about what that does for your football team.
Mm-hmm.
Think about what the defense is able to do if it's not constantly trying to keep the other team from scoring after we give them the ball back. So,
yeah, and Terry being drastically underthrown. And I know we like to put the stat up there that, he's number 1 in contested catches, but there's a reason why he's number 1 in contested catches. because he's always being underthrown. And I believe that Jacksonville game from Wentz, it really affected the owner over there, and it really affected that fan base, and it affected the national media of who he can be. A lot they say, all you're gonna do may give you 10 games, and then the other 7 you're just not gonna know. I'll take those 10 games with excitement.
Yes. And to your point, if they win that Jacksonville game, he ain't going anywhere. Nobody's not enough is said about the fact that the owner just didn't like that guy.
Didn't like him at all.
No.
Even the rumors that he wanted to talk with him and the owner denied it. I mean, he probably knew from there, it wasn't going to.
Well, he didn't get the vaccine, and I think it pissed him off.
Yep. I agree. But like you said, I'm okay. The upgrade is a significant upgrade over Heineke, and the excitement is there. I'll take an erratic Wentz over, lack of what's the word I'm looking for from Heineke.
Yes, well, it was easy to see after the quarterbacks we played last year that the Mahomes of the world and the Heinekes of the world, there's a big difference in arm talent.
Exactly. It's a big difference in arm talent. And as we've seen before, Wentz, he showed it last year. That's what I think people was forgetting. They want to throw 2017 as being his last productive year, but he showed the arm talent in multiple games last year. And he's never had a number 1 wide receiver. Right, all of his top pass catchers has always been tight ends. He's never had anyone like Terry McLaurin. And can you even name a top receiver from the Colts last year? But I think this situation that he's in is just as important as from the Commander side as it is from Wentz side. On your latest mock, you had 3 of the top tackles taken within the top 10, and no quarterbacks. That was surprising. Well, when we talking about actual, worth is not surprising, but the league is quarterback driven. And, I don't know, the NFL might shut down if it's not a quarterback taken in the top 10.
Well, on the show, we're blessed to be able to talk to guys around the league. And from talking to people that know more than I do, I just got this feeling like it's not going to be Atlanta. I think they're excited to get a wide receiver. They need weapons, and with the trade from Mariota, they can kick that can a year. So I think they'll take the best receiver on the board. And I know that the Panthers aren't excited about the quarterback class, at least not that high. I mean, I think Carolina and probably Seattle and maybe the Giants with that second pick all would love to trade out of there and trade back.
I agree.
But again, without a hot quarterback, right, there's not really a lot that you're willing to give up assets for to trade up. So I would be shocked if it wasn't tackle for the Panthers if they stick there. Because, I mean, realistically, say what you want about Darnold, but, I mean, is the quarterback that you draft there going to be any better than Darnold? Maybe.
Yeah, and that's the question that I kind of ask myself is, like you say, Mariota, you say Trubisky. I mean, even Baker Mayfield, where would those, just putting aside their contracts, where would those guys fit in this year's class? Where would they fit? And is it a team that's willing to take one of these quarterbacks within the top 10? And I don't see it, but because it's a quarterback-driven league, I won't be surprised if one.
It wouldn't shock me. I absolutely. I mean, you're spot on there. Teams talk themselves into overdrafting quarterbacks every year. It just feels like this is the year where maybe that doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen early there. Like I could see a team like Seattle. Again, my understanding is they'd love to get back in the middle of the first round and take Ritter. Like that's their guy. I could see, a team jump back in to the first round late if Malik Willis is still there.
Or get the 5th-year option, maybe.
At 20, that's why that seems right. And for the Saints, I don't think that they made those moves to get a quarterback. Like I think they'll take the best wide receiver and the best tackle on their board and get better because I think they think they're a good football team with Winston.
Yeah. And I think, and with the Saints, Michael Thomas is a wild card. I don't know I mean, I know he was hurt last year. I honestly don't think he just wanted to play. Honestly, last
It was
year,
a
whatever
rough year
was,
for them last year.
yeah, it was, and I don't think he wanted any part of it. I mean, it was rough from the start. The timing of his surgery and different things like that. So, but when it comes to no quarterbacks being taken, you get to like 8 or 9. I think that puts us in a good spot. But Kyle Hamilton was still on the board when you went with Drake London, and just just watching, some more tape and just looking at different postings of people talking about Drake London. He's a big guy, but he can move. And I think that's something that they need, a big guy that can move. He's physical, he can jump. But you left Kyle Hamilton on the board. Why would you rather have the big wide receiver what we actually need, or a game changer like Kyle Hamilton? Like, what was the thinking behind making that choice to Drake London?
That mock draft and the one that we'll put out later today, the final, are what I think they'll do. Okay. I think I would have taken Kyle Hamilton if I was the one making the selections. I don't think that's what they're going to do. And I started leaning that way because, when Ron gave his press conference the other day, I thought it was interesting. He made mention of this. Everybody calls it the Buffalo nickel. He made sure to tell us that they call it the Buffalo because in Carolina, it was Shaq Thompson who played the role.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They had a linebacker that played the Buffalo. So I think we're forcing this thing on them. And I don't know that that's necessarily the way they'll go. Remember, this is a team that scored 19 points a game last year.
Exactly.
Got to get more explosive.
Mm-hmm. And
there's going to be a run on receivers. So this notion that I think most of us had even just 2 weeks ago, myself included, that there'd still be a premium wide receiver at 47, I don't think so. I don't think so anymore. Like even a guy like George Pickens, who frankly is my second wide receiver. Overall, I don't think he gets out of the first round.
I don't either. I don't think he gets
past. I thought he was a viable option at 47. Mm-mm. He's not a viable option at 27 now.
Yeah, I don't think he gets past 22. These guys are dynamic. These Ohio State guys are dynamic. Yep. And what we saw along with the quarterbacks from, the playoffs, the Josh Allens of the world and the Mahomes and all those guys, they have receivers. Like they have, premium receivers, and that's what teams are looking for.
Now we do too. I'm curious to see Diami in year 2 with a better quarterback. We're all excited to see Curtis Samuel move off the side field and onto the regular field. But it's not like we're lacking the weapons. That's why I never thought that we had to go receiver 11. But if the plan is to get a receiver in this draft, 47 might not be it anymore.
I agree. And that's why I think about like my dream scenario would be a possible trade back, maybe with the Steelers, maybe with the Packers, to pick up a late first, an extra second, and maybe an extra third or fifth that we don't have. Whatever. I don't know about the draft points, but that'll be something that I would kind of consider to kind of move back and pick up more points, because like Mayhew, in the interview, picks 30 to 100, 30 to 70 is like prime picks. And if we can add a couple more there, I think that'll help our football team out even more.
I agree. That always makes me laugh though, right? It's like, well, rounds 2 through 4 have more value than the first round.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's like 40 picks in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or whatever it is, 40 times 3. So a couple hundred picks in those 3 rounds. Of course, it's more opportunities than there's the first round where there's 32. But I mean, personally, wouldn't care if they got 8 picks. I wouldn't care if they ended up with 4 picks, and those 4 picks were all bona fide starters and gave you big minutes. Like, to me, getting a bunch of 5th and 6th that you can maybe get a guy that's going to start for you in 2 years doesn't excite me nearly as much as getting 3 picks in the first 2 days.
Yeah, sometimes you can be too cocky and think you can find another Cam Curl or, you can find a Brady and different players like that. No, that doesn't happen every year. And, banking on that, the talent is up front for a reason. So what do you think about the Ron Payne news? Do you think, where do you think that's actually going? Do you think it's just smoke? Do you actually think there's a separation brewing?
Oh, well, I mean, once they gave Jonathan Allen $18 million a year, that was the end of Payne. That's why I was always confused why they just let Settle walk out the door for $2.5 million a year or whatever it was that the Bills gave him, because they had to know that why would Duran take any less than the 17 that Jonathan Allen just got last year?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just from an ego standpoint, you gotta line up to this guy every day, look over him and be thinking to yourself, well, why is this guy, not only did I take less, but why did they think I was worth $4 million less a year than this guy? Like, what is that? So I bet you they didn't even offer him, knowing that it would be, why would he take anything less than what Jonathan Allen? And why on earth could they pay it?
That puzzles me about the defensive line. It puzzled me.
They should have moved him last year, or certainly by now. You can't keep him. But this is what Ron kind of does, right? Like, I'd rather have him for this year and go out here and try to win some football games, and I'll deal with the consequences of replacing him later. Like, I can appreciate, I guess, if he feels like, well, listen, I can't get his value. Let's say he's worth a third round pick. That seems right to me. A third round this year or a fourth round this year. Maybe you can sneak a third round next year. Like, I always like doing that. I'll take a round lesser this year if I can get maybe a round more higher next year as well. What does that do for your football team this year?
Yeah.
And really, what do they have behind Payne? Bada and the guy they just signed from Carolina that you never heard of? I mean, doesn't excite you, right? So
no, not at all.
Now, maybe in the second round this year, they're drafting a guy like Kerryon Winfrey, the D tackle, Maybe, again, they're trying to get out of 11 to 14 or 15 and take one of the tackles from
Jordan Davis.
Sure, Jordan Davis or his partner.
Devontae Wyatt.
So
because I think Ron is I'm not a part of the crowd. I think Ron is on a hot seat. I don't think he's on a hot seat at all.
No, he's not.
But he wants to win. He wants to get rid of a lot of this off-field noise, and he said repeatedly, the only way he can do that is by winning. He always says, winning cures everything. It might not get all the fan base, but the majority, wants to win, and I think that's the type of moves he's making is to try and win. That's why I don't think they'll trade Daron Payne. I
wouldn't be surprised if they franchise him next year.
Exactly. Yep. That's
what for 2 more years, and you could keep him for 3 years if you wanted to.
Yep. Yeah,
worry about it later.
The Mcclory, I kind of saw something like right before our meeting about what you posted about the type of, like, Ron. He does have a type of guy, right? And he'll live and die on it, just like with Jamin Davis. He has a type of guy, and you had mentioned that Mcclory is like a party type of guy. Where did you kind of get that information?
That one was from. I just read it yesterday too, so it was not. I don't want to say which one, but it was like a Danny and Jeremiah type guy. Forget now, Peter King. It was not. I don't know that it was either one of those. So I don't want to
I got you.
They said it, but it was in one of those articles about like people's views of him and why he went from, I think, being a surefire first round pick to a second round pick, where at least people were doing the work on him. So I'd be surprised. And again, quarterback this year, really? Like, I mean, didn't you just watch what happened with Wentz?
Yeah.
In Philly? Like, again, the demise of Carson Wentz wasn't necessarily Carson Wentz. It was, I mean, they had a brand new GM, a brand new head coach, and they drafted a quarterback in the second round. Like, what does that say to you? Like, it's start over time. That's not what we're trying to do here. And to touch on what you said earlier about Rivera, I think you're 100% right. I think we can see just the extension for the offensive coordinator.
Yep.
Right? Like a coach on the hot seat doesn't go to the owner.
No.
Which is how these things happen, right? I mean, it's not his money. He doesn't just give him a raise and an extension. You got to go to Dan and say, hey, I want to give Scott a raise and an extension. I think he's earned it. And they give him 3 years. So, no, Ron's not on any kind of hot seat. Carson Wentz, by the way, did you notice, Carson Wentz has got 3 years on his deal. The new offensive guard has got 3 years on his deal. And I think Ron got 3 left on his. So,
I think Carson's the guy. I think Carson's the Scott Turner's
That doesn't scream to me draft quarterback in the first 2 rounds. It screams draft weapons and offensive line and let's go out and win some football games.
Yeah, because I think Carson is here. I know we can get rid of him in 1 year unless something dramatically happens.
Sure.
I think he's going to be the guy this year and at least next year. I think that's what's Ron play. Not to kind of go into next season worrying about what we're going to do at quarterback. I think he's tired. I think he's ready to go with Wentz. And just like you said, with the extension with Scott Turner, I think they are glued together. All 3 of them is glued together for these next, 2 or 3 years at least. And Ron has said repeatedly, we need to protect them and get them weapons. A quarterback is not getting him weapons and is not protecting them at all. So I won't be surprised if we don't go quarterback at all. I mean,
I'd be so.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
And for the guys, just quickly for the folks that say, well, you can always draft one in the 5th or 6th rounds. Yes, sure you can. But again, you've got a quarterback on the roster that's a 5th or 6th. Like that's what you draft 5th or 6th round quarterbacks for, is to try to get a Heineke. We've got that. So again, and he's not that old. So drafting quarterbacks to me, if we had a 3rd round pick, maybe, because I feel like in that range, maybe a Carson Strong is still there. Somebody that actually has like some possibility, some upside. He could have sat the full year, maybe 2, and just let the body get right. But guys like Corral that want to start right away, it doesn't make any sense to me.
What do you think would be last question? What do you think would be a big disappointment with a pick, the 1st and 2nd round?
The only disappointments at 11 to me is guard and running back. There's not a tight end good enough to take up that high, so I wouldn't throw that in there. But to me, that's about it. Anything else? I mean, I've said it before. If a guy like Charles Cross falls to 11 and you thought he was, a top 8 player and is going to play left tackle for the next decade for your team, I mean, I'm sorry, Charles Lennon, you've been great, but I don't have any problem moving on to somebody I think is upgrade. So I don't think a tackle at 11 should be out. I don't think D-line should be out. I certainly don't think corner should be out.
Not at all.
So yeah, I mean, really, guard and running back is about the only things that I'm not interested at 11, and really that kind of goes for the same thing at 47. 2nd round, 47, that area seems to be the sweet spot for running backs the last couple of years. But again, I think I can get a guy like James Cook or Zamir White with a kid from from Notre Dame in the 4th round.
4th round.
Yeah, that's where I like taking running backs. Because I don't frankly think we need one. I think I'd like one. You know what I mean? Particularly now that you're playing an extra game every year. I just think the more backs, the better, particularly since I'm not in favor of giving out second contracts to running backs. Like, I mean, Gibson's got 2 years left on his deal because he only has the 4-year contract, or maybe it's even 3 years for where he was drafted. So it's got to be 4 years. So, I mean, he's only got a couple of years left on his deal, and frankly, I don't plan on giving him another one. So if it's not this year, it's next year for running back.
Yeah, I agree. I don't agree with it either. But his confidence grew at the end of the year. And he got a lot of praise from the coaches and the players about him having more patience, hitting the holes a little bit better. And drafting a running back in the 2nd round would just it will shock him. I mean, he's like you say, they are players, but they also are human. Sure. That'll do something. And if you say you believe in someone.
The only problem with Gibson to me is he's been hurt both years that he's been here.
Yep.
The turf toe the first year, and we forget because and Al Gaudy told me this the other day, which was a great point. He's kind of like Morgan Moses, right? Morgan was hurt all the time.
Oh, yeah, in the beginning of the year.
Every week, he never missed a game. Yep. Well, that was last year with Gibson, man. That he had the fracture in his
bone bruise.
Yeah. And it wasn't a bone bruise. Turns out that was like a small fracture.
Small fracture. Yeah.
All season long, and I think he missed a game. So, I mean, kudos to him. But he really has been kind of injured the first 2 years, which makes you nervous because, I mean, I don't think you get more healthy the older you get.
Yeah, I'm a guy that likes running backs in the middle rounds. I think we should at least explore the options. And if someone is there that they really like, take them. Just like you said, with the extra game, Gibson's injury history, that should give him the understanding, like, this is a business, you're hurt a lot. I think that'll be a good pick. So overall, I think, I'm excited about tomorrow. I have a little more excitement than I've had in a long time. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm doing these podcasts more, and just interacting with more Commander fans, on the Twitter Spaces and different things like that. It gets you a little more excited. But what do you have coming up for the viewers? You want to, plug in any of your handles, your podcasts? And
Sure. We do the live streams Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. Let's see, today, when I get done here with you, we got Nick Ackridge from PFF, covers the Commanders. We'll do our full 32 mock Friday. I think Logan Paulson comes on to do.
Oh, he's awesome.
I do too. I love having him on. He's a great guy. So he'll be on Friday to go over, obviously, the pick from Thursday and what we can expect for Friday. And then so usually around 2:00 Eastern time, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays.
Okay. Yeah, buddy. That is Big Doug from the Douglas Show podcast. Thank you again for joining. We hope, spend some more time with us. We really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yep. That's Red Zone and Lab podcast. One beat, one sound, one hot, one love.
There's a lot of bad stigma about shopping for a used car. Well, come visit us at iCargo Motors. We'll take care of you. We'll ensure that your experience is not only seamless and efficient, but also satisfying. Because at iCargo Motors, we believe that the best form of currency is integrity.
Welcome back to Red Zone and Lab podcast. This is Dion Deuce Blackney, and we're back with our next guest. It's an honor. Special guest, Mark Bullock, formerly of the Athletic, right? AthleticDC and the Washington Post, covering the Washington Commanders, the Washington football team. Now you can kind of find all Mark's work at Substack. You want to just give a quick plug to your Substack, Mark?
Yeah, sure. It's just markbullock.substack.com, and that's where all my work is now. And it's a $5 a month subscription, and then you get access to all the articles and breakdowns of Washington football.
Yes, I just renewed last month for my yearly subscription.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, I enjoy it. Getting the first scoop on different things that you put out, early scoop. I appreciate that. Yeah, so let's get into the Washington Commanders. What's the state of the football team on the football side? The business side, I'm kind of little gas talking about that. But as far as the football side, where are they as far as offense, defense, special teams?
I don't think they're in the worst position. I think they started building towards something, and I think you look at their record last year, considering their quarterback play and then the strength of the schedule that they had to get 7 wins wasn't that bad. And I think on reflection, going into last season, everyone kind of recognized, hey, they're playing a first place schedule, so it's going to be much harder. They're playing a bunch of really good quarterbacks, and if they manage to match their win total from Rivera's first year, which, they were one win off or something like that, or maybe it was the same. I can't quite remember, but if they managed to get close to it or match it, it would be a relatively successful season. And I think, looking back now at that, I think that's pretty accurate. So I think with obviously the Carson Wentz trade, which I'm sure we'll get onto, that is a big upgrade at quarterback, and with a much easier schedule, at least on paper this year. There's no reason that they shouldn't be in a position to take a step forward and and maybe get to 9 or 10 wins and make a playoff push.
Yeah, because I think the first year that playoff run was fool's gold, right? I mean, our division was terrible. Dak got hurt, and so I don't, I look at that and I was like, oh, I think the expectations rose so much more because of that playoff win, and it was really fool's gold. Like, we wasn't supposed to go to the playoffs that year. I mean, we had a losing record. We wasn't really supposed to go to the playoffs. And then what Heineke did in the playoff game, that really pushed the expectations higher to come into this previous year. So we mentioned Carson Wentz, but we'll get into that a little later. But the offseason to this point, besides Carson Wentz, how do you think the approach? Do you think it's a good approach that they've taken this offseason?
I think the thing we have to remember with the offseason is that it's still ongoing. It's not something that, like, yes, obviously free agency comes and there's the big wave of free agents at the start, and there's always the second wave in the second week, and then it kind of dies down a little bit, and then we get the draft. But and obviously they weren't active. Like, they hardly made any moves because a large part because of the Wentz trade, and I still think they had the cap room to make moves if they really wanted to. But I think we have to remember that last year it was after the draft that they signed Charles Leno and they traded for Eric Flowers, and that was two key starting members of the offensive line that was so successful last year. So just because we're at the draft doesn't mean that the offseason's over and we say it's terrible. And I get that there's a lot of fans, certainly in my mentions on Twitter, that are not happy with what they've done, and I get it is a little bit underwhelming at this point, but it's not the complete offseason yet. It's tough to evaluate the entire offseason because they've still got cap room and Rivera and Martin Mayhew and Hurney and all of those guys have all emphasized that there's still stuff they can do after the draft, and there's still guys that they could sign, and even like things like bringing back Landon Collins, or there's a number of guys that they could still sign in free agency after the draft, depending on who they land in the draft and what their needs are. So I don't think it's a complete offseason yet. And I think that's the point that we have to kind of remember, that, yes, it's a little bit underwhelming at this point because they haven't done a hell of a lot, but there's still plenty of time for them to do something.
And you mentioned Landon Collins. Can you kind of explain to us the differences, or what is the Buffalo nickel?
Yeah, sure. So that Buffalo nickel spot that he played last year, it started for Washington the year before that with Cam Curl. And essentially what it is if you take if you have a 4-3 defense and you take one of the linebackers out and you walk him out kind of in a spot halfway between the slot receiver and the tackle, that's a little spot that's called an overhang defender. And that's essentially what this Buffalo nickel is that they're not quite a slot corner. They're not quite a linebacker. At any given time, they could be asked to perform the role of either spot, but it's kind of an in-between. And it's essentially, if you're playing single high defenses with one safety deep, you roll down the strong safety, and the strong safety and the Buffalo nickel are essentially the same position at that point because they're both playing in that overhang role. So that's all it is. It's got made up to be this bigger thing that it is necessarily, but it's something that they experimented with Curl, and it had success because they saw a lot of 2 tight end sets, and they traditionally struggled to cover 1 tight end, let alone 2. So having Cam Curl in there gave them someone physical that could fit the run well if they decided to run out of those 2 tight end sets, but also still cover the tight ends if they call a pass. So that's the theory behind it, is you have the bigger body, and last year when Collins took over, they switched to more of a zone coverage, where Cam Curl matched up a little bit more man-to-man, but last year when Collins moved into that Buffalo nickel spot, they played more zone, and that meant that he didn't have to match up man-to-man on a tight end or a slot receiver where he probably wouldn't have done well. They just let him drop to his spot, play top down on everything, and that's when we saw the huge improvement in Landon Collins' game. So But it's kind of a versatile spot because it can change role a little bit depending on who's playing there. But it's something that, when Collins was there last year, when they were playing their best football last year, they were playing lots of zone coverage, and it kind of freed him up to be quite a strong run defender as well as a decent zone defender in coverage. So
how important is that position to Jack Del Rio's defense? Because we have a lot of, Kyle Hamilton is one of the picks that you see in a lot of mocks, and then you still have Landon Collins out there. I mean, you never know, but and then we do have Cam Curl, and we still have what's the guy's name? His nickname was Gotcha, the free safety from last year.
Derek Forrest.
Derek Forrest. From what we have currently on the roster, where do you think they should go to kind of fill that? Because it seems like something that Ron Rivera really wants to have that guy. Do you think they have to go Kyle Hamilton, or what do you think?
I mean, they don't have to. I think they would probably do that if he's available, but because he would fit that kind of spot really, really well. That would suit his skill set almost perfectly. So I think it's all dependent on the kind of players that you have, and if they wanted to. And Rivera has mentioned in the past in Carolina, they've had linebackers play that spot, and you have corners play that spot, you have safeties play that spot. If you have an athletic linebacker like a Cole Holcomb or Jamin Davis, you could quite easily walk one of those guys out and put them in that spot. But the issue with that is then Washington lacks linebacker depth. And so if, as we kind of expect, but they haven't really done much to address the linebacker position so far. It seems like they're going to try to roll with Holcomb as the Mike, even though they were complaining about him playing the Mike at the end of the year. And then Jamin Davis would play the other spot. And then they'd have the Buffalo nickel, which is they kind of fell into needing to do that because they had no linebacker depth last year. If they managed to find a true Mike linebacker, they managed to find a Luke Kuechly out of nowhere and put him in. They could quite easily move Holcomb back to outside, and Jamin Davis could play the Buffalo nickel, and then finding a safety or drafting a Kyle Hamilton or whoever to fill that role isn't necessary. But I think it seems like they probably don't really like any of the options that would be around in the draft for a Mike linebacker. So they're going to try Holcomb there and try to find another option for the Buffalo nickel spot.
Yeah. So your last write up, you kind of looked at a couple linebackers. As far as any of the linebacker position, because of course we need depth. What type of guy are you which one of those prospects are you looking at that will fit this defense?
I think you could fit most of those guys. I think there's a pretty decent group of linebackers that could go anywhere from sort of the mid-20s to sort of the 4th or 5th round. There's a really good group of linebackers in there. And they all have somewhat differing skill sets. And because you have the versatility of Holcomb if you're saying he could play the Mike, or you could leave him at the strong side position, and you can keep Davis at the will, then it kind of gives you flexibility to fit to the guy that you like. Personally, I quite liked Darren Beavers from Cincinnati. I think he offers some really nice instincts in zone. And in that article you're talking about, I showed an example of how much scanning he did, where he would drop back to his spot, but he was looking around for threats to his zone, and he would adjust his coverage to those guys, which was really encouraging. And then I think he also, in the couple games I watched, he played a couple different spots along the linebacker group. I think he had experience playing all three, Sam, Will, and Mike. So he's someone I quite like, and especially there's talk of him being maybe a fourth round guy, maybe lasting to the fourth round. So I think that would be really good value for them, especially if they're not necessarily looking for a starter. They're more looking for depth or like a rotational package kind of player. Then that kind of fourth round range would be about right for a linebacker. So he's probably the one guy that stuck out to me as someone that would be a nice fit.
Deron Payne. Of course, I don't know if it's smoke. I don't know what's it's draft week. Anything can come out. But a lot of times when there's smoke, there's fire. Two-parter. How important is Deron Payne to this defense, and can he be replaced in this year's draft?
He's certainly an important part, especially more so now that they let both the backups go with Tim Settle and Matt Ioannidis. And I think that's where the frustration in this comes. I think everyone can see that, it would be tough to keep all of the talent they had on the defensive line. And once they paid Jonathan Allen, then Deron Payne maybe should have been one of the prime trade guys that they could have tried to trade somewhere, and then maybe you can extend Tim Settle and keep him at a lot cheaper rate, and you've got Matt Ioannidis, and you've still got a nice rotation there. But because they lost both those guys, then it kind of puts them in a real tough spot to try to trade Payne this offseason, and that means that he's going to, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that he's going to walk in free agency, but it means that they can't really afford to let him go right now without, if they wanted to spend the 11th pick on Jordan Davis, then that would fill that hole, but they still need depth. But I think a lot of fans would be upset with that. So, and how replaceable is he? Yes, he could be replaced in this draft. As I mentioned, Jordan Davis is a monster nose tackle and would be a not quite a like for like fit, but certainly Payne is more of the guy that shades the center as the nose tackle, whereas Jonathan Allen's more of the 3-tech. So, and Jordan Davis kind of fits that role as shading the center as the nose tackle. So, I think he would be a very, very good player and a very good fit for them if they wanted to trade Payne and take Davis. But I don't think that's going to happen. Certainly, I think it'd be more likely that they'd look in the later rounds for a defensive tackle.
Yeah, because I think even with Deron Payne, I don't agree with a lot of fans that say Ron is on the hot seat, but I think he himself wants to win, and he needs to win. He's mentioned time and time that the outside noise is very infectious. So he says that winning cures all. I don't know if it's going to cure everything, bring back the total fan base, but it'll bring back the majority if they can win. And, trading Deron Payne right now, I don't think is going to help them win right now. That's why the moves with Settle and Ioannidis are so puzzling. I can't defend them for it because I can't find a reasoning on why would you do that if you wasn't going to extend Payne. I mean, maybe he looking at 2 years. I mean, maybe franchise next year. I mean, I don't know. Do you franchise a guy after you paid another D tackle?
Yeah, I'd find it hard to believe that they franchise him next year. I think, it's funny because this time last year, fans preferred Deron Payne to Jonathan Allen, at least in my mentions. And personally, I prefer Jonathan Allen because Payne had the sack numbers, but he had the sack numbers because Allen was getting extra attention. And Jonathan Allen was like the end of not this season gone, but the year before that, the end of that season, Allen was electric. He was fantastic. And then he continued that this year and he deserved his extension. But now everyone's kind of flipped and said, oh, we love Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne is terrible and get rid of him. But actually, Jonathan Allen took a big step forward this year, but Deron Payne actually took a step forward as well. And he played a pretty good season. And the sack numbers might not have necessarily been as good as in previous years, but it's not all about the sack numbers. It's he controlled the line of scrimmage with Allen in the middle, at least. The edges were a little bit dodgy, but in the middle they had some secure run defenders, and then he generated some push as a pass rusher, and he hasn't quite lived up to not necessarily the expectation because it wasn't consistent in college, but he has had the potential with a really quick first step to become a really good pass rusher as well as a really good nose tackle, which is a pretty rare combination. And I don't think he's quite gotten to that potential. He's not reached that potential yet, but he still had a pretty good year, and he's still a very good football player.
And we talk about good football players. Let's switch to the offense, which is more sexier. Terry McLaurin. So anytime I kind of talk with people about his contract, I kind of look at it like from his side, they are looking at it as maybe he should be in the, close to the first tier of wide receivers, because if you look at, like, he's not the number one contested catcher. He's that for a reason, right? Because most of his balls were all underthrown. So, of course, they look at, I know his camp is looking at it from that side. He was underthrown a lot. Why does he create, or how does he create so much separation, not only at the top of the route, but at the bottom of the route?
Yeah, he's a very, very, very good route runner. He's really, really fun to watch. And the way he sets up routes and attacks leverage is phenomenal, and he understands that if he's running a post route, he doesn't just come straight off the line and then break on the post. He sets that up by taking a wider angle, setting up the defender, making them widen themselves, and opening up the space for him to break inside. And he does those kind of things very, very well. So he's a very detailed route runner, and then of course he's very quick. Obviously he has the long speed, but he has good quickness too in short areas. So he's just a phenomenal football player, and he's very detailed and knowledgeable about his routes, and very polished in that regard. So he's really fun to watch, and has been the probably the one offensive player that has been the most fun to watch for the past few years.
Yeah. So the wide receiver core that we have in the building, do you think that core is strong enough? Or
I think you could make an argument that it is. If you're confident that Curtis Samuel comes back healthy, and the guys in the building would know better than anyone else whether he is or not. And then if you're confident in De'Ami Brown taking another step forward, and again, the guys in the building will know better than anyone else because they get to see him. But you could make the argument that that's not a bad set of receivers, and certainly at this point last year, we were pretty happy about that as a set of receivers. So I don't think we should write off Samuel for obviously the injury was annoying and it lingered on throughout the whole year, and I think too many people are writing him off for that, and I understand why. But if you look at his history and his career, he's never been a guy that's been missing 8 to 10 games a year. He's been a guy that's been pretty consistently healthy. So I'm willing to kind of write this off as a one-off bad season and trust that he'll be available this year. And then De'Ami Brown taking a step forward, then they'd be pretty happy with it. But I think with the addition of Carson Wentz and trying to attack down the field a lot more, I think you can also just make the argument that, if we can add that one more real nice talent that can really round out the group nicely, then I think they could certainly try to do that. Certainly with the 11th pick, if they like a guy there, then I think you could justify it. But if the guy that you really like isn't there, then I don't think you need to force it and go, well, we need a receiver, just draft the next guy. Like, make sure it's a guy that you like and you want, and it's value for the pick that you're taking him at. But certainly I think you could justify taking a receiver if you like it.
Why does Cam Sims not get as much playing time? And it seems like when he is out there, he produces in different ways, whether it's blocking or, making a tough catch downfield. And it's been kind of frustrating. I know he's frustrated the past couple of years. It just seems like he cannot get on the field.
Yeah, he's one of those players that isn't the kind of consistent route runner that like quarterbacks like to see, with 5 yards of separation and a real wide open throwing window. Like, he's a guy that, because of his size, he doesn't run necessarily the most crisp and precise routes, which a lot of guys that his size struggle to do, just because they're that much taller and it's harder for them to sink their hips down and create the ability to break off sharply. So that's not to say he's a bad route runner or a bad player. It's just that's kind of how he is at his size. And the way he wins is obviously the kind of the vertical separation with the jump balls and the contested catches, and trying to use his frame to shield the ball from defenders. And I guess either he hasn't built the trust with a quarterback yet, or more likely there's quarterbacks that maybe are a little bit more conservative, or they feel like they need to see a receiver open before they throw it rather than giving them a jump ball chance. And I look back to, and this is a part of a conversation with Drake London in the draft, is the question is, can he separate? And I look back to when Washington had Josh Doxson. He wasn't the guy that separated. He was the guy that won vertical, those jump balls, the 50-50 balls. And one of the big reasons why he struggled in Washington was they had a quarterback in Kirk Cousins that liked to see guys break open, or, they had the speed to outrun guys and he could throw it beyond them. But he didn't like to give the 50-50 jump balls because he was too conservative. He didn't trust the receivers to go and make that play. And he was too worried about the interception. And perhaps Cam Sims suffers from that same thing. Now, this year with Carson Wentz doesn't worry about that kind of thing. Right. He likes to throw it up and gives his guys a chance. So maybe this year will be the year that Cam Sims finally gets a little bit more opportunity. And we heard there were some rumors last year that Ryan Fitzpatrick, before he got injured, obviously in the first game, but during training camp and stuff, that one of the guys that he really liked throwing to was Cam Sims, because Fitzpatrick was kind of that same guy that will throw it up and give his guys a chance. So perhaps that will help Cam Sims kind of have a little bit of a breakout, but we'll see whether he gets kind of caught in the bottom of the depth chart or not.
So when we wide receivers, maybe two. What two wide receivers would you think both complement what Scott Turner wants to do, and also complement Terry McLaurin?
So I think everyone sees the kind of natural one as being Drake London because he has that size. And I think you can certainly make that argument that he can win vertically by those jump balls and contested catches that we kind of just talked about with Cam Sims. And he has terrific hands. And that was the thing that stood out when I watched him, was he's got great hands even at full extension. So if he's reaching for a ball that's thrown a yard behind him or a yard in front, he can, even with full extension, he can make those hand catches away from his body, and catch it strong without, a DB trying to smack it out. So he's got really good hands, and with his, I think, 6'4" frame and his long arms, that means that he offers the quarterback a huge catch radius. So a quarterback can really take advantage of that, and that gives them obviously some size and a red zone threat that they don't necessarily have right now, or don't make use of in Cam Sims. So I think that would make sense, and obviously that would be a fit for Carson Wentz, as we kind of just mentioned with Sims. But personally, for me, the receiver I like the most is Chris Olave, because I think he just fits basically any offense. Every offense needs a deep threat, and obviously Washington has speed with De'Ami Brown and Terry McLaurin and even Curtis Samuel. They're all fast. They can all run deep. But Chris Olave is he's a polished route runner to begin with, but he also, the thing that always stands out with me, and I've mentioned it like 10 times now, is that he understands tempo of routes so well. He understands that he doesn't always need to go full speed to set up a deep route. He can lure a defender into kind of a false sense of security by going a little bit slower, but giving himself an extra gear to go to once the ball's in the air to run by a guy and catch up to it. But he also knows that when he's working underneath, like sometimes there's a hole in the zone coverage and he needs to throttle his route down and go a bit slower and give his quarterback a chance to see him in that hole. And so he does a really, really good job of having an extra gear to go up to, but also being able to come down a gear and slow his route down and adjust the tempo of his route to the situation that he's in. So, and that speaks to a very mature receiver, a polished receiver that really understands the art of route running and receiving, rather than just I can run fast, I can run by everyone and catch the deep ball. He does a lot more than that. So, and people say that it might be a little bit irrelevant because they've got speed and deep guys with Mcclory and Samuel and Brown, but the more deep threats you have, the harder it is for defenses to cover that. And if you have Curtis Samuel in the slot and you've got Terry McLaurin on one side and you've got Chris Olave on the other, then defenses have to play two high coverages because they have to cover that. You can't just leave a single safety in the middle and hope that the corners will win and the safety can maybe cheat to McLaurin. You can't do that. You need to have a second safety back there. So then that opens everything up underneath and for the tight ends and the slot receivers and the backs. So in the offense that Scott Turner, I believe, wants to run, certainly the offense that Norv Turner used to run, his father, then adding a vertical threat will always be an option for this offense.
Do you think he's kind of the Sean Jackson when you think about ball tracking the ball?
Sure.
Talk about tempo.
Yeah, I think he understands those kind of traits as a deep threat. I'm always reluctant to put a Deshaun Jackson tag on a guy because that puts a certain expectation. And Deshaun Jackson, I think historically is like the best or the second best deep threat in the history of the NFL. So you don't want to put that expectation on a guy. But in terms of play style, as you say, with the tempo and the ability to have that extra gear to catch up to deep throws, and it's very hard to overthrow him. And as you say, the ball tracking, those are all certainly traits that Jackson shared and made Jackson such a good deep threat. And that's obviously an encouraging sign for someone like Olave.
Do you see any running backs in this draft that they might try to target in the middle rounds, maybe?
I haven't personally watched running backs yet. I haven't got to them because I've been focusing on the receivers and the linebackers and safeties. And then we hear the reports a few weeks ago that they have 5 or 6 running backs in for top 30 visits. And I'm like, that's interesting. But I don't know on that one. I think they probably would like to add a running back to, give them some security if Gibson gets hurt. And he has had a little bit of a history of getting hurt. And obviously the fumble concerns that if he continues to fumble the ball, then McKissick doesn't seem like a guy that you can give 25 carries to a game and like they were giving Gibson at the end of the year. And maybe Jarrett Patterson could be that guy, but obviously you have doubts with his size to withhandle that kind of workload. So I think they could add another running back. I'm sure they would like to. Whether that needs to be in the draft, I don't know. Maybe they could find a guy in free agency that after the draft, or maybe they find a guy that they really like that can do more than just be kind of a backup to Gibson. That they could be kind of a receiving option as well, and maybe they value that in the sort of day 3, round 4, 5 kind of area possibly. But I think it would be odd for them to prioritize that in the second round, which is the kind of guy that they've been looking at, the guys that have been linked with kind of in that second round area. Those are the guys they've had in for that top 30 visit, which makes it odd, but I don't think that's what they'll do.
Is Olave, is he a return guy?
I don't think so. Maybe. I don't think so. He's obviously he's been knocked for his physicality, and as a return guy, you can take some pretty big hits. So I don't imagine he'd be a return guy. Maybe like in high school or something, he probably was because he just ran by everyone. But I think probably now he's probably not a return guy.
Yeah. With the 11th pick, I'm gonna give you a scenario. Drake London, Olave, Kyle Hamilton is there. For some reason, we have a run on tackles, cornerbacks, maybe a quarterback sneaking the top 10. And then we also have, I don't know, let's say Green Bay calling with maybe 22 and 54. I think their second round is 54, somewhere around there.
Yeah. What
do you do?
Yeah, so if all of those guys are there, and you have that trade offer on the table, I think you'd be tempted to take the trade, add an extra second round pick, and be able to like replenish what you lost from the Carson Wentz trade and add more players and hope that with both London and Olave and presumably some other receivers in that kind of group still on the board, that the receiver run doesn't happen until maybe Olave falls to 22 or, if not, you have then 2 second-round picks to try to find a receiver in a pretty deep class. So I think with that kind of offer on the board, you would take the trade back and hope that one of the receivers falls, or if he doesn't, then you still replenish picks and you can still find good players later on. If that trade offer isn't on the table, I think Kyle Hamilton is just a better overall player than the other two. And again, you look at the depth of the receiver class and you think you can circle back and find a really good receiver in the second round. So I think if you look at kind of the value there, adding Kyle Hamilton to kind of round out that defense at that Buffalo nickel spot, then you can kind of work on the offense and address the receiver spot in the second if you want to do that, or a tight end, or whatever else you want to do, an offensive lineman. But I think if you were able to land Kyle Hamilton, then you could say, well, we've got our kind of 11 starting defense kind of set in stone once Hamilton fills that Buffalo nickel spot.
Yeah, so we heard, it's the consensus pick, Drake London, Olave, Kyle Hamilton. But then, Rivera has his little comments, and then now you may be thinking if Cross drop, you never know, he might go there. The news with Deron Payne, he can go Jordan Davis. What is your dream scenario for the Commanders at number 11?
Well, I think the dream scenario is having one of the top players fall and being able to trade out and add more picks. But what that trade would be, I don't know. There's just too many variables there. But if you're staying at 11, I think Kyle Hamilton is the best player that's likely to be there, that would kind of fill what they want to do. And obviously, like, if they do trade Deron Payne before the draft, which I don't think is going to happen, then maybe you'd look at Jordan Davis or one of the other defensive tackles if they're there. But I kind of think that Kyle Hamilton probably is going to be the best case scenario. I understand that maybe one of the offensive linemen is maybe slightly better positional value, but and it'd be tough to pass on a really good franchise left tackle if one of those guys falls. But they did just sign Charles Leno to a long-term contract, or certainly a contract extension, which I think keeps him here for 2 or 3 years. So they're pretty happy with that. And once that contract's done, then you'd hope that maybe Cosme has developed enough on the right side that they could trust him to move over to the left side. And he's certainly athletic enough. He's one of the more athletic tackles that has come out in the last 10 years. So he's certainly athletic enough to hold down that left side. And so you'd hope that would be the kind of future plan at left tackle is you have Leno hold down the spot for now, and then Cosme can slide over. And then in a year or two, maybe you're looking at who could be the new right tackle rather than the new left tackle. So for me, I wouldn't be looking at one of the tackles. I still think Kyle Hamilton would have the bigger impact, certainly in his first year or two in his career in Washington.
So before we go, Carson Wentz, what was your initial reaction to Carson Wentz, and what do you think he can bring to this offense next year?
Yeah, I think my initial reaction was kind of like everyone was a little bit dejected about it. He's not the biggest name as what he once was, and you hate to see a guy that the Eagles gave this huge contract to after winning a Super Bowl, and then immediately ran out of town, and then 1 year later the Colts are trying to run out of town. So it gives you some pretty bad vibes about that. But after watching him, he's still a good quarterback. He's still a starting level quarterback, and he's certainly a lot better than what they had last year. So he's a significant upgrade. He might only be the 15th or 16th best quarterback in the league, but that's still probably 15 or 16 spots higher than what they had last year. So that kind of upgrade, and with the arm strength that he has, to be able to hit the deep ball to Terry McLaurin and not have him underthrown or just completely missed constantly, would be, I mean, that would just shoot the offense up dramatically on its own. But then you add in Curtis Samuel coming back healthy and De'Ami Brown taking a step forward, and maybe they draft another receiver, if it's an Olave or Drake London or whoever, you add those extra weapons into the mix, then suddenly the offense looks like it could be an offense that, could score 20 plus points a game rather than, relying on the defense to hold teams under 10. So, you hope that he can certainly play to that kind of at least mid-tier quarterback level, and anything beyond that is a bonus, and that should be good enough for them to win more games this year. Do you have a projection yet, or you want to wait, maybe post June 1? Yeah, I would say at least wait to see what they do with the draft and round out with what they're out, and then see where how many wins they might get. But I think it's a little bit too early to guess. Yeah, me too. Yeah, buddy, that is Mark Bullock, football analyst. Thank you so much for joining. Once again, if you just want to plug your Twitter and your Substack to the listeners. Sure. My Twitter is at Mark Bullock NFL, and my Substack is markbullock.substack.com. Yes, please subscribe. I subscribe. Actually, I renewed last month my yearly subscription. You learn a ton. A lot of times when I'm in my mentions or when I'm in other people's mentions, I say, well, just go check out Mark Bullock. And I, try to, tag you, because a lot of the information, a lot of the breakdowns, and hopefully you'll be able to come back on one day just to kind of explain us, how did you get here? It's a lot of, when men, like, young girls, young boys that might want to be football analysts, and just to be able to hear, how someone at your status was able to get where you are. Thank you so much for joining Red Zone in the Lab podcast. Thank you all for listening. One beat, one sound, one heart, one love.
Thank you for listening to Red Zone in the Lab podcast. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Red Zone in the Lab. And you can download our podcast at Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean. And please visit our website at redzoneinthelab.com. Thank you.
We're back. Welcome back to Red Zone in the Lab with Deuce.